Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution.
So the very first chapter in Brené's book, The Gifts of Imperfection, have to do with the idea of cultivating authenticity and letting go of what people think. Cultivating authenticity and letting go of what people think. Say that with me. Cultivating authenticity and letting go of what people think. Those two things are directly related. The more we are stuck in giving so much attention to and being so easily influenced by what other people think, the less likely we are to be our true, remarkable, original, authentic selves. And so I think this is why she's linked those two, that we need to be looking at how do we start to let go of the bondage of what other people think. That doesn't mean we don't care about people, but we aren't ruled by somebody else's thought or impression or viewpoint of who and what we should be. Letting go of what other people think and cultivating authenticity. If you're not familiar with how Brené began her work and how she was kind of thrust onto to a world stage, I encourage you to look up the TED Talk she gave quite a number of years ago now in Houston. She began as a researcher, researching what it takes to live from a place of worthiness and researched authenticity and the experience of shame that so many people suffer under. And so she gave this TED Talk, and she talked about shame, and she talked about authenticity, and she talked about what it's like to be in the arena and to stretch and to grow and to have your critics on the sidelines demeaning you and shaming you and so forth. And it went viral, and suddenly she's thrust on the world stage, a researcher. And there is so much of what she writes about, whether it's in this book or any of the other books that she's authored since, that really parallel what Unity and what New Thought and what metaphysics have taught for a very, very long time. And if we look deeply enough into the very heart of it, we see that it is really a very strong spiritual message as well. To live our lives from a place of wholeness, to understand, to truly understand that each and every one of us was born right the first time, that we really are an original expression of the allness of the divine, that we are not meant to try to be carbon copies of each other. And though it may mean that there is so much diversity among us, so many different ways of being a human being, that it might be easier to love some people more than others, but that should not ever influence the importance and the realization that each of us is a unique spark of the divine. And for many of us in this room, I believe that we have been on a journey much of our lives to really come to a deeper understanding of who and what we are genuinely, and to look at how can we bring that gift forward. And for many of us in that exploration, we come up against messages that we either got from our culture or from our families that perhaps well-intended or not, suggested that somehow we should be something other than what we knew ourselves to be inwardly and naturally. Raise your hand if you can relate to any part of that. Yeah. And so for many of us, there's some, not just the awareness, but there's a little bit of healing work to do and getting comfortable with understanding who we really are, and then being willing to do the deep inner work to continue to grow in expressing the best version of that. Not because somebody is saying we're supposed to be a certain way, but because we are being true to who and what we really are, all the while that we are growing and developing. Does that make sense? Okay. The chapter opens with this quote. Often people attempt to live their lives backwards. They try to have more things or more money in order to do more of what they want so they will be happier. But the way it actually works is in reverse. You must first be who you really are. You must first be who you really are. Then do what you really need to do in order to have what you really want. Bless you. Authenticity is a practice. So is inauthenticity. They're both a practice. They're both a practice. And our journey in this exploration is about practicing, choosing, consciously practicing being our authentic selves. Here's Brené's definition. Authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. Choosing authenticity means cultivating the courage to be imperfect. Take that in for a moment. Cultivating the courage to be imperfect. Say that with me. Cultivating the courage to be imperfect. Some of us may have grown up in an environment where we were constantly expected to be anything but imperfect. We were expected to be perfect. She's saying here, cultivating the courage to be imperfect, to set boundaries, and to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. To allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Exercising the compassion that comes from knowing that we are all made of strength and struggle. Strength and struggle. Nurturing the connection and sense of belonging that can only happen when we believe that we are enough. I am enough right where I am now. Say that with me. I am enough right where I am now. Is there anything that in that statement that says you can't continue to grow and evolve? No. Is there anything in that statement that gives you license to be a nincompoop? No. No, but it gives you the freedom to start on solid ground, on healthy ground, on whole ground, to express yourself while still continuing to grow. Authenticity means to show up and be real. To show up and be real. Too many of us hide. Too many of us hide, or we think that somehow we have to be like somebody else. I remember the early days in my ministry where I was trying to figure out, well, who am I as a minister? What is that going to look like for me? I certainly don't fit the model of ministers that I grew up with. They were all older, now my age, older men. I know, it happens, right? It happens. All older men. And I couldn't be that. I couldn't be that. But who was I to be? How was I to be? What does it mean to be me and express as a spiritual teacher? And what do I do about the fear that I have of doing it wrong or doing it bad or not being good enough? What do I do with all of that? And if I can't find my way through it, how will I ever be able to reach? How will I ever be able to teach? And so all of this is such a deep journey, a journey of inquiry, a journey I think that begins with exploration when we're younger, trying to figure out and trying to try on for size how we want to be and what fits for us. But eventually, and this is what's so important, eventually we have to make peace with who we really are on the inside. Who we really are on the inside. By nature, believe it or not, I'm a pretty private person. By nature, believe it or not, I really am an introvert. I've worked so darn hard to figure out how to do this. I love to be in my house by myself in the quiet. Never in a million years would I have consciously picked doing this. And yet, I wouldn't want to do anything but this now. But the journey of making peace with who I am and understanding that some may label my introversion or my aloofness or my shyness as, well, she's just cold. or the fact that I'm a private person as, oh, she's afraid to ever be vulnerable and really share with you the tough stuff she's been through. And yet none of that is the right explanation for who I really am. Does this make any sense? Can you put it onto yourself and look at that inside of yourself and say, you know, I'm not going to try to become a round peg in a round hole if what I am is a square peg. I'm going to figure out how to be the best square peg I can, but I'm not going to try to be something that I'm not. Is that not freeing? Can you imagine the gift we would give the entire next generation if everything was rigged to support them in discovering their authentic selves and being their authentic selves? And when I say everything being rigged, I mean from the family dynamics to the messages they get in their music, to the messages that we put out on television, to the video games that they play, to the way our educational system is structured. When each of us is playing to our true authentic selves, not only do we live a happier, more purposeful, joyful, healthy, physically healthy life, but we also influence others to do the same. And we also then give our natural gifts in a way that make the world a better place, right where we are. We need that. I was so moved by the statement from Sarah Brethnack that I shared with you at the beginning of the service. The authentic self is the soul made visible. The authentic self is the soul made visible. Say that with me. The authentic self is the soul made visible. Is the soul made visible. Think for a moment of the people that you personally feel the closest to. Think about that. Would you not say that a good part of why you feel close to them is you've seen their soul? You experience the essence of them. You have experienced them in times of their great joy and triumph. And you've also sat with them at moments when they were down and vulnerable or afraid or totally confused, but you were with them. Is it not when we are real that we become close? It's when we're real, when another sees our authenticity, when another sees both our strength and our vulnerability, our strength and our struggle, we give them so much more of us to connect with than if we just play at the superficial level of personality, or if we just are trying to put on a face or a way of being that we think will make nice. I'll tell you, this journey that we're on through the ideas she expresses in her book can rattle some people's cages. You do realize that there is risk in stepping into a greater degree of your authentic self. You do realize that, right? What do you think the risks might be? Judgment? Embarrassing, could be. Disapproval? Alienation? Misunderstanding. The people in our lives that are closest to us, if we've been playing a game of pretend for whatever reason, whether it's at work or at home, if we're playing a game of pretend, trying to be what we're really not, and we suddenly decide, I don't want to live my life that way anymore. I want to set myself free. I want to be who I am and show up in my strength and in my struggle. Those who have seen us only in that other way, that false way, are going to be shocked. They're going to have to get used to that. Some of them might go, finally. Those are the ones you want to keep in your life, by the way. Those are the ones you want to keep close, right? But some of them may be very confused. They may be very upset. And you may begin to find that your relationships change. Some of your friendships change. And that's okay. And that's okay. She writes about her experience when she started to do this work herself. I've enjoyed reading all of her books and listening to many of her talks, and part of what I've enjoyed is the way she has moved from being strictly that researcher trying to understand how this plays in other people's lives, to being that person realizing, wait a minute, I'm just like them. I need to work this stuff myself. She writes, when I first started mindfully practicing authenticity and worthiness, I felt like every day was a walk through a gauntlet of gremlins. Their voices can be loud and unrelenting. What if I think I'm enough, but others don't? It's a legitimate question, right? And you might think you're enough when your authentic self, and others might go, I like the other one better. So what? What if I let my imperfect self be seen and know, and nobody likes what they see? Oh, well. These side comments are mine. What if my friends, family, coworkers like the perfect me better? You know, the one who takes care of everyone and everything, right? These are some of the consequences. These are some of the potential risks. In her research, some of what she has come to understand and realize is just how much of this work can trigger massive amounts of shame for people. She talks about how this idea of stepping into your own power, especially for women, can really be a major shame trigger. I like how she paints these contrasting points. See if you can relate. She says, a push-pull, the double message dilemma. Don't make people feel uncomfortable, but be honest. Don't upset anyone or hurt anyone's feelings, but say what's on your mind. Sound informed and educated, but don't be a know-it-all. Don't say anything unpopular or controversial, but have the courage to disagree with the crowd. No wonder why some of us feel like it's crazy making, right? Right? I believe that our souls, when we get quiet enough, I believe that our souls resonate with truth with a capital T. I believe our souls already know who and what and how we are to be. And if we would but listen more deeply and then have the courage to follow that, we would find our lives unfolding in amazing ways. We would be stepping into the experience of our own true worthiness. We would be stepping into the experience of a life that is filled with purpose and meaning. Not that we will not have challenges. We always will have challenges. But it will be a different version of us moving through those challenges. I have felt and thought for a very long time that part of this idea of healing and this idea of authenticity that has to do with how we also support and raise our boys. You know, for women, we're taught a certain way of being, and I think, by and large, at least in our culture, many women have broken through a lot of those stereotypes. I've seen a lot of that in my own lifetime. But what I haven't seen, and what I long to see, and what I think is essential, is that we begin to raise our boys differently than we have been. We've got to give them permission to be whole beings. Her research says that for men, what our culture holds up for men as values are these: emotional control. That's not healthy. Emotional control. Primacy of work. Is that healthy? No. Control over women. Don't get me started on that. And pursuit of status. Is that... I think it's an advantage having been born a woman. I really do. Because I think our stereotypes are beginning to break apart in ways that we are freer to be our full selves. I actually think it's pretty difficult to be a man today, regardless of the color of your skin, and harder if you're not in a white-skinned body. We need to change the way we raise our boys to help them understand there is a wide range of what it means to be a man, not just this very narrow stereotype. And until we do, they're not going to be their authentic selves. And if they're not their authentic selves, then half of our population is wounded. She says it can be very tempting to choose to be liked and accepted over being real. Think about that. Very tempting to choose to be liked and accepted over being real. When we do that, we wind up with a life that's peopled with people who really do not know us. We wind up living a life that's going to feel empty because we will not have the intimacy of close, deep, meaningful connection. The only way somebody is ever going to feel close to you is if you have given them the gift of really knowing you in your genuine, authentic self. And the more comfortable you and I become in being our genuine, authentic selves, what will happen is those that just do not prefer that authentic, genuine self of us will begin to move away. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing or an angry thing or an unpleasant thing, but we will find that we have started to make room for those who really want to be with us. Does that make sense? Doesn't that sound a whole lot better than the other? You're only lukewarm about that? I think it sounds a heck of a lot better. So I want to wrap this up by giving you some ways to practice this very quickly. Number one, understand the relationship between authenticity and attracting the right people for you in your life. Understand the relationship between authenticity, you being authentic, and attracting the right people for you in your life. Second, let this be a recurring practice for you to start being true to yourself. To start being true to yourself. Say what you really feel. Risk showing up and being seen. When you're out ordering a meal, order what you really want to eat, not what you think you should be eating. Doctors here might be upset with me for that. Try it on just for a little while. Wear the clothes you want to wear. Start being true to you. Start being true to you. I like this line from her. Start small and be prepared to let the wrong people fall out of your life. The third, whenever faced with a vulnerable situation, refuse to play small. Whenever you find yourself in a vulnerable situation, refuse to play small. I will not play small any longer. Say that with me. I will not play small any longer. I had to work personally so hard at that because I was afraid that I thought if I played small, then everybody in my family and in my life would like me better. They wouldn't be upset with me. That's a whole other thing. Whole other thing. Didn't need to share that. Too much information. Fourth, get inspired by other people who are authentic. You know, as you look in your circle of friends that you think, wow, that person is really authentic. Be inspired by them. Have the courage to open up a conversation about it. Say, yeah, you know, you always seem to be so genuine and real. How do you do that? Well, actually, they don't do it. You don't do authenticity, you be authenticity. And the last is, let this be your affirmation. Let this be your affirmation for the week. I practice showing up and being real. I practice showing up and being real. One more time. I practice showing up and being real. Turn to somebody next to you and convince them that you mean that. Go ahead. Whoops. All right, did you believe them? Did you believe them? Or do they need a little more work? Do you need a little more work? Do we all need a little more work? All right, practice showing up and being real. Thank you and God bless.